what Boris Johnson said was just part of the cut and thrust of parliamentary debate. But it seems that cut and thrust has really made its way outside of the chamber of the House of Commons. It stopped being mere rhetoric and got a whole lot uglier yesterday.
Heckled and swarmed. This is the moment Sir Keir Starmer had to be whisked away by police officers who feared for his safety as he returned to Parliament last night. Protesters could be heard shouting "traitor," as well as criticising Sir Keir's stance on COVID and accusing him of protecting paedophiles. This, of course, sparked by the Prime Minister when he falsely suggested the Labour leader had been involved in the decision not to prosecute serial sex offender Jimmy Savile.
This leader of the opposition, a former Director of Public Prosecutions, Mr. Speaker, he spent most of his time prosecuting journalists and failing to prosecute Jimmy Savile, as far as I can make it.
And it's those very words that caused some to blame Boris Johnson for Sir Keir being targeted.
Boris Johnson, having been advised not to do it, came to the House of Commons last week and deliberately poured poison into the well of British politics by raising this issue of Jimmy Savile.
A disgraceful episode, and it's part of a downward spiral of behaviour in our politics. And of course, I'm afraid it has been fomented and encouraged by the Prime Minister.
The first issue, as we've seen, is that what you say can encourage nasty reaction.
Countries are falling apart faster. Because there's news out of England this week about far-right leader and alien adjusting to his new skin suits. Nigel Farage. On Monday, Farage, who founded the Brexit Party, was walking through the English city of Newcastle when he was hit with an unusual form of protest. There he is, he's the guy in the suit, walking in the middle, and up comes a guy and boom, hits him with a milkshake. Okay, now listen, now hold on. Look, I don't approve. That is the difference between our two countries. No American would ever willingly give up dessert.
Milkshake though, you would expect anyone, that costs more on Farage's suit, that milkshake.
Well, yeah, I think so. It's milkshake, because it's not like he had a yop in a super soaker. It's an interesting situation.
It's a £5.
The first issue, as we've seen, is that what you say can encourage nasty reaction.
Brexit, austerity, or even climate change, Davey Hay asked, is it okay to throw milkshakes at politicians? Now, while campaigning in New
A big improvement on Nigel Farage's milkshake moments. This is a delicious milkshake, as only Chelmsford knows how. Fantastic, thank you for the great...
The difficulty here, though, is if somebody is so mentally vulnerable and unpleasant, they're going to be pushed into it by Joe Brad. Anything could push them into it.
Well,
we cannot live our lives.
I would argue it is then incumbent on all of us to avoid triggering people like that unnecessarily.
But I'm still going to show you this picture of Nigel Farage after the drive-by shaking. There he is. Ironically, he...
I don't know. I think if they want an answer, there have been plenty of explanations by the BBC and Victoria Coren as well.
No, more than anything to say to Nigel Farage?
No.
Are you going to carry on?
What if they did it?
It would depend on the circumstances.
I'm just giving you the circumstance. Somebody runs up, a big guy, runs up to Anna Soubry today and throws a milkshake at her. Would you say that's funny?
Probably not. Thank someone by having milkshake thrown at them that leads then...
But you wouldn't like it with a female politician?
That is a difficult question to answer.
It is. That's why
these politicians, I do feel bad for them because it's I'm on tour at the end of this year, and you travel all the way there to try and win something, then you arrive, and they're going all around the country doing this campaign trail. Just get a milkshake in the face. But I think the way round it, just whenever you arrive, immediately pour one over your own head. Yeah, then it's done.
It was done with no care for the consequences to Sir Keir Starmer.
No, he knew what he was doing.
Because it's
an act of violence against a male politician is fine, but against a female politician, unacceptable.
Well, I stop short of it necessarily being violent to a certain extent, because
it won't stay there.
So you admire Nigel Farage's restraint in this situation. You find yourself praising him for holding back for the first time.
I don't think I'll be praising Nigel Farage anytime soon for anything.
Tom Pate, you find this all hilarious. Would it be equally hilarious if female politicians were having milkshakes thrown at them?
I don't know. If Heidi Allen or someone had some milkshakes built over them, I'm not quite sure.
Hang on. It's not someone spilling a milkshake. It's someone actively throwing a milkshake.
It was a sort of an underarm lob.
No, it's not an accident. They're deliberately throwing
No,
it.
my
question remains, hilarious though you may find it, that these right-wing male politicians, political figures, are getting this thrown at them. If it was female left-wing politicians, would you find it as hilarious?
Well, the gender question is a difficult one because there is.
Why is it difficult?
Because it is, to a certain extent, an act of violence, but there is a nuance there. Some have suggested the reaction might have been different had it been somebody on the right making this kind of remark about left-wing politicians. What I did when you heard it, did it kind of set your teeth on edge, or did you think that's fair enough?
I don't think that's fair enough either. I just thought it's in context with what the type of jokes that Jo has done before. She used to do a joke, I think, about the way to a man's heart is through his breast pocket with a bread knife. You know,
ugly scenes. As I say, I'm used to them, but not kind of what we see much of in Westminster, really.
If a politician is hit,
would you defend Anna Soubry having a milkshake thrown at her?
I had tried to answer this.
You haven't answered
there
it.
is a certain amount. There is a certain amount of subtlety.
Well, that's a horrible thing to say, I think, but I also think if he wants to say that, then that's something you have to accept within the boundaries of free speech.
The suggested the reaction might have been different had it been somebody on the right making this kind of remark about left-wing politicians.
What I did notice a lot of people tried to compare it to was that bloke from UKIP, what's he called, Carl Benjamin, saying the thing about not raping Jess Phillips. Now, that's a horrible thing to say, I think, but I also think if he wants to say that, then that's something you have to accept within the boundaries of free speech.
The rapes
that shouldn't have been ushered by Boris Johnson, or uttered by, I should say, Boris Johnson. About
You say that, but there's no question, is there, that the Crown Prosecution Service failed in the case of Jimmy Savile, and that Keir Starmer was the boss of the Crown Prosecution Service. So were his comments wrong?
Funny, if random men ran up to Anna Soubry today and threw a milkshake at her.
Well, that isn't what I said.
Well, that's what I'm asking you. That's what happened to Nigel Farage.
I've tried to.
One you find hilarious, other one you can't really
Right.
answer. Isn't this the problem? Is that actually, we would all find it grotesquely unfunny and really seriously wrong if men were running up to female politicians and throwing milkshakes at them, right? It wouldn't seem funny. It would seem very intimidating and very wrong. Nigel Farage, I know, has been subjected to just as bad threats, if not worse, than any other politician in the country. I don't think that's right either.
Well, I'm making the point that it is completely unacceptable. And Brendan Cox, the widower of Joe Cox, made the point that if you do this sort of thing, it normalises violence and intimidation. But the fact is that the fundamental objective of the top priority of the left right now has to be the European elections. And Nigel Farage is at the top of the polls. He's about to be the face of the UK for 5 years, 10 consecutive years. And he is somebody that the young people in this country fundamentally oppose because he is...
And by the way, perfectly entitled to. I wouldn't personally vote for him. However, what I would say is, what has this achieved either, Tom, right? Whatever side of the divide you're on, with these elections coming, the front page of every paper today is Nigel Farage as a victim. How does that do anything to help stop him surging in popularity?
Absolutely nothing, and it hasn't achieved anything. I'm making one small point, and it's just that it's okay. We don't all have to live in this febrile world where everyone hates each other. It's okay on the odd occasion when a bit of food is thrown at a politician to just...
But it's not okay for you.
His Trump moment this morning, Boris Johnson being accused of inciting violence after Sir Keir Starmer was confronted by protesters last night who repeated Jimmy Savile's smears made by the Prime Minister last week in the Commons.
Furious MPs are calling for Boris Johnson to retract his words for saying the Labour leader failed to prosecute Savile during his time as Director of Public Prosecutions. And we're joined now by the Technology Minister, Chris Philp.
Or 3 minutes long. They did mention Jimmy Savile, that is absolutely true, but they mostly were going on about Julian Assange and COVID and all kinds of other things for reasons I don't really understand. So I don't think it's reasonable to make a link between the comments about Keir Starmer's record as DPP and the harassment he suffered yesterday, which is completely unacceptable. And as I say, has no place.
1 million people a year. So you cannot link him in the way Johnson did.
Yes, you can.
Johnson knew what he did, and it's been going around on far right web chats for a long time. Johnson knew exactly what he was doing.
Before that session in the Commons, he was specifically advised that it would be a bad idea recklessly he went ahead, and we now see the consequences.
Yeah.
Can we just let's hear from David Lammy, who.
Right, it must be a very scary moment for these politicians. I think it comes down to the nutcases. In America, they know when there's a mass shooting or anything, there are copycat attacks all the time.
Doesn't
crazy people.
Doesn't Joe Pierce go somewhere to deflating that and proving how stupid and
You know what? No, because what she's basically saying is that doesn't go far enough. Use battery.
No, that's a joke.
Why didn't she at all? Not to a smart guy like you.
Yeah.
Right, but to somebody who maybe is not smart and is slightly crazy,
and who happens to listen to Radio 4's late night show,
but actually maybe reads the media coverage of the joke, which was designed deliberately to provoke. Right, they read the media coverage and think battery acid.
No, it's not even a funny gag. If she just said, "Why doesn't somebody throw sodium chloride over it because that's assault?" You know, there's an actual punchline to what she's saying.
But the difficulty here.
Anybody involved in any form of public entertainment or anything should be extremely careful about articulating any kind of humour which pertains to attacking politicians, because there are crazy people out there that will get mixed messages and may act on it.
Somebody's going to base their behaviour on something Joe Brand says on a bed.
I didn't think I would wake up in this country 3 years ago to find out that a female politician had been assassinated in the streets of this country by a lunatic who'd been whipped into it by the frenzy over the
politicians of all
debate in this
colours
country.
out and about.
One of your Tory colleagues, the former cabinet minister Julian Smith, is wrong, is he, when he says what happened to Keir Starmer tonight outside Parliament is appalling. It's really important for our democracy and for security that the false Savile slurs made against him are withdrawn in full.
It was like.
It was very aggressive, very ferocious. I've got to say that the behaviour of some of the protesters was slightly crazed. And in those circumstances, things can be very unpredictable. It's very worrying to me that some of what we were hearing had been stoked from mainstream politics in the dispatch box.
The first issue, as we've seen, is that what you say can encourage nasty reaction. The first issue, as we've seen, is that what you say can encourage nasty reaction. Yeah. What's your critic?
I don't know. I think if they want an answer, there have been plenty of explanations by the BBC and Victoria Coren as well.
Are you going to say to Nigel Farage?
No.
Are you going to carry on?
Ugly scenes, as I say, I'm used to them, but not kind of what we see much of in Westminster, really.
Point about the mob and the lunacy of the mob. And totally indefensible. But you can't feed them. If you feed them raw meat like that, that's what's going to happen. And this